Okay, um, have a couple questions here, example questions for you. We're going to start with the top. Basically, this scenario holds true uh, throughout all the different situations in this spreadsheet. So let's take a look at that. So Corporation A is authorized. I remember authorized here, not necessarily hasn't sold these yet, but is authorized by its charter to issue 1 million shares of common stock and 500,000 shares of preferred stock. Common stock has a par value of $5 per share, and there is no listed par value for the preferred stock. The preferred stock is a 10% preferred stock, so if the company decides to pay dividends, it should be paying dividends of 10% of the stock value to its shareholders, its preferred shareholders, before anyone else gets dividends, if those dividends end up being paid for the year. So situation one. Assuming the above facts, suppose that Corporation A sells 300,000 shares of common stock for $8 a share. What is the correct journal entry to show the transaction? Now remember, the first step here, we know the number of shares and the dollar value. So we know exactly how much cash we are getting in this sale. So first, I'm going to do a debit to cash for 2,400,000. That's just the 300,000 times $8 per share. And then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to first credit common stock. And remember, when we do a credit to common stock, we're just looking at what the par value is, if there is one. So $300,000 times the $5 par value gives us 1.5 million. And then obviously these two amounts don't balance, so whatever the difference is between the par value and the cash, we need to put that somewhere, and that's going to go in paid in capital in excess of par. And of course that's going to be $900,000 there. Okay, so that's the journal entry for that first situation. So that would be, again, selling stock above par value, common stock would be that scenario. So for situation two, similar scenario, except now instead of common stock, we're looking at the preferred stock. Again, first step is going to be just debit to cash for all the cash that we're going to collect here, and that's going to be $10 million because it's 500,000. All of the preferred shares that were authorized times $20 a share. So we get, oops, if I can type, okay, $10 million cash, and then we're going to credit preferred stock for 10, I'll just move over to this cell here, 10 million as well. Now see, since there was no listed stated value or par value for that preferred stock, we didn't have to do the same thing that we did up here where we just did the par value and then we had another account for capital in excess of par. We're able, without any par value or stated value, to just list the amount we paid for it and then put the rest or all of that amount into the preferred stock account. Okay, so that one's pretty easy. So now we're looking here and we're assuming that all the stuff that we've journalized so far has happened. So step 3 here, and I'll scroll back up so you can see the situation at the top if you want to refer back to that. These two things have already happened, and now we are selling 100,000 shares of common stock. So remember, we had 1 million to begin with. We've sold 300,000 here, and so we have another 100,000 that we're going to sell for $4 per share. And if you notice, since the par value is $5 per share, this is going to be a sale below par value. So we again have a credit to, or a debit to cash for the entire amount of the sale, 100,000 times $4 per share, and that gives us cash of 400,000. And I left that space there, and I'll come back to that. But next step that I would do is go ahead and credit what we know the par value is. So we're going to credit common stock for the par value of 500,000, because if we had sold this for par, it'd be 100,000 times $5 per share, and that would be 500,000. Okay, since we didn't sell it for that, we're going to come back up here, and to balance this entry out, we need to debit this account up here because we see it has a balance in it. Remember, that's, you have to check and see if it has a balance in it, and if it does, you can just debit that account for the difference between what was paid here and what the par value is. So we're going to have a debit to paid in capital in excess of par for that 100,000. Okay, so you see we have debit 400,000 plus a debit of 100,000 equals 500,000, credit of 500,000, so that balances, and that works out. And now, instead of having a $900,000 balance here, if we wanted to see the balance, we'd have to net these two together, and we would say $900,000 credit, $100,000 debit, and the balance in that account would be 800,000, which we're going to look at in a second here. Okay, so now situation 4 is another sale of common stock. This time we're going to sell all remaining shares of common stock that have been authorized. And down here I just went ahead and copied that initial fact pattern over again so that you can see it in the screen still. So I have 600,000 shares of common stock, and things aren't going well for the company. The price has fallen to $3 per share. Again, that's going to look a lot like this transaction here because we're selling below par value with a slight wrinkle. So, first step, always first step, debit the cash for whatever amount we're making here. We see 600,000 shares times $3 per share gives us $1.8 million. And come down here and credit common stock for what the par value would be, and 600,000 times $5 per share would be the par value, so that would be 3 million. Okay, so we see a fairly big discrepancy here. So the first step that I want to do is I want to see if there's any of this paid-in capital in excess of par that I can still use to balance out this transaction. So like I said just a second ago, our balance is this $900,000 here credit minus this $100,000 debit. So we have $800,000 left of paid-in capital in excess of par. We'll go ahead and put that here. Debit paid-in capital in excess of par, and we'll put the full amount that we have left. Okay, so now if you add those two together, that's $2.6 million. So we're still $400,000 shy of balancing the debits and the credits in this transaction. So we still need another debit entry, and now since all of the paid-in capital in excess of par has been exhausted, if you refer back to your slides, you'll see that when there is no balance in paid-in capital in excess of par, the debit goes straight to retained earnings, and that would be for $400,000. Okay, so obviously we still have to balance this equation for this transaction, and we know this one isn't going to change because it's the par value of the stock times the shares sold. So that doesn't change. We just have to make up the difference somehow. We use the remaining balance of paid-in capital in excess of par that we got from this credit entry here minus this debit entry here. Used all that up here, and the difference remaining to balance with this $3 million, we take out of retained earnings with a debit here. Okay, so now we're down here to situation 5. Okay, again, this part right here is just a repeat of the initial fact pattern. In situation 5, what we're doing is, as a corporation, we've decided that the market is not accurately reflecting the value of our stock, so we've decided it's a good idea to go ahead and go in and buy up some shares of stock. So we're going to do a debit entry to treasury stock for the amount we're paying for these shares. So at this point, we're not really worried about par value. So we have 500,000 times $2 per share. So that gives us a cool million. Okay, and of course, to pay for something, we're going to assume we're paying in cash. So we've got a credit of 1 million to cash. Okay, pretty easy. So jumping down to situation 6 here, this is when these shares we're holding right now, and now all of a sudden, like this situation says, the market's heating back up. We've decided to sell these shares again. So we're going to, again, this is very similar to selling common stock with a par value, like we did up in the first transaction up here. Back up here. Okay, so it's going to look very similar to that. Of course, since this is treasury stock now instead of common stock, it will have some slightly different names. So first step again is to debit the cash account for the amount that we expect to make or that we have made off of this transaction. So we have 500,000 shares times $6 per share, and that gives us $3 million. And then we'll come down here, and instead of par value now, the initial entry that we're going to show for treasury stock is what we paid for it. So this $2 per share back here that you see right there, that becomes kind of the new par value for the treasury stock. Okay, so we have credit to treasury stock for, and we're going to use the number that we paid for it to show kind of how it was valued to us when we bought it. So we have 500,000 times $2 per share, so we have $1 million here. Okay, and again, this doesn't balance obviously because we have way more cash than we do for this credit entry here. So we need to balance that with paid in capital from treasury stock. Okay, and that's just going to make up the difference here. That's very similar to paid in capital in excess of par, and that's going to be for 2 million. Whoops. Okay, so now we have $3 million cash, treasury stock value, the $2 per share that we paid for it, times the 500,000 that we're selling, equals this 1 million right here. And the difference between this 3 million and this 1 million is essentially the excess money that we're making off of this stock sale compared to what we bought the treasury stock for. Okay, so it's very similar again to paid in capital in excess of par, and we have a balance there of $3 million debit and a $3 million credit.